but are they actually going to try to deter these players from committing flagrant fouls? Or is the fine going to be just a slap on the wrist? Well, the verdict is in, and the fine, the punishment, all that it's going to be is just a slap on the wrist. With a new CBA deal, these players are making much.
They thought nobody was watching. They thought the fouls would keep happening. The fines would stay small, and the whole thing would quietly disappear. They were wrong. Here's what nobody expected when Caitlin Clark walked into the WNBA. Not the sold-out arenas. Not the television ratings that hadn't been seen since the league's founding era. Not the moment-by-moment social media firestorms that turned every single game involving the Indiana Fever into a national event. And definitely not this. A reckoning so loud, so public, and so impossible to ignore that the league itself had no choice but to finally respond. Because here's the thing, this story isn't just about hard fouls. This isn't just about one rookie absorbing contact on a basketball court. This is about what happens when a sport's biggest moment collides directly with its biggest problem, and what happens when millions of people are watching every single second of it. Rising tension. Let's go back to the beginning. When Caitlin Clark was drafted first overall by the Indiana Fever in 2024, the expectations were unlike anything the WNBA had seen in years, maybe ever. She had broken the all-time NCAA scoring record. She had dragged Iowa to back-to-back national championship games. She had put women's college basketball on television sets in homes that had never once tuned into a women's game before. And when she arrived in the pros, she brought every single one of those fans with her. Arenas that had been half empty for years suddenly had wait lists for tickets. Fever games were regularly pulling television ratings that matched and sometimes beat NBA broadcasts on the same night. ESPN was sending crews to regular season games in May like it was Game 7 of the finals. The WNBA was experiencing a cultural explosion, and Caitlin Clark was the reason. But not everyone inside the league was celebrating. Almost immediately, the physical play started. And look, basketball is a contact sport. Every player in the WNBA is an elite athlete. Hard fouls happen. Competitive aggression is part of the game. That's true at every level from high school to the Olympics.
$4,000 for the second one, and up to $10,000 if you're a repeat offender. Let's take a look. Front office sports finally making themselves useful. As soon as Annie Constable left front office sports, and I know we give Annie a lot of ish around here from time to time, but as soon as Annie Constable left front office sports, they've been dead to us. they haven't really been that useful. But finally, Colin Salau, salute Colin, salute, finally doing something for us. WNBA slightly raises the technical flagrant foul fines for the 2026 season. Players will be fined $500 for their first three technicals, up from $200 from last year. WNBA players have welcomed an unprecedented salary increase this year under the new CBA, but the additional income will also come with an increase in fines. The league has revised its fine structure for technical fouls, flagrant fouls, and flopping ahead of the 2026 season. Okay, we're touching on flopping too. Paige Beckers, flopping, Paige Beckers, flopping, Paige, flop.
But what fans started noticing wasn't just hard defense. It was something that felt different, more deliberate, more personal. Shindy Carter's full speed, off-ball body check that sent Clark to the floor while the play was happening 40 feet away. Flagrant, no argument. Dejanai Carrington's elbow that caught Clark in the eye on a play that had no basketball justification. Flagrant, reviewed, fine issued. J.C. Sheldon, multiple incidents, multiple viral 5 ads, multiple fan reactions, one player crashed Twitter and buried inside one of them, and an announcement that just changed everything. The WNBA handed down a punishment in this league felt like a parking ticket. Fans did the math publicly. These players were now earning more than ever before under the new CBA. Salaries had finally started reflecting the caliber of talent in the league, and the fines being levied for dangerous, flagrant contact, amounts that some players could cover with a single Instagram sponsorship post. The league's credibility was cracking in real time. Here's what made it worse. Clark never complained publicly. Not once. She got up. She kept playing. She hit the next shot anyway. And somehow, that silence made the outrage even louder. Because millions of fans watching were left asking a question that had no comfortable answer. Why is the most important player in the league absorbing the most dangerous contact in the league? And the league itself seems unbothered. Social media didn't wait for an official response. Clips stacked on top of clips. Slow motion replays. Side-by-side comparisons. Former players weighing in. Sports commentators losing composure on live television. Even fans who had never watched a WNBA game before suddenly had opinions. And they were not quiet about them. The pressure was building. And inside league headquarters, the silence was becoming very, very expensive. Then something changed. A report surfaced. Quietly at first. A few sports pages, some industry insiders, whispers on basketball forums. The WNBA was reportedly preparing to restructure its entire fine and punishment system ahead of the 2026 season. And the moment that rumor hit the internet, everything exploded. The rumor spread faster than any trade deadline bombshell, faster than any draft night surprise. And once fans started reading the details, the actual numbers, the actual policy changes, the reaction was unlike anything the WNBA had seen in years. Half the internet was celebrating. The other half was furious. Let's talk about what the league actually did. Because after months of mounting pressure, viral controversies, and a fan base that was growing louder and angrier by the week, the WNBA walked into the 2026 season with a revised fine structure. And on paper, it sounds like progress. Technical foul fines jumped from $200 to $500 for the first 3 offenses. Flagrant foul penalties were increased. Flopping. Yes, flopping now has its own dedicated fine category, which tells you everything about where the league's priorities had drifted. And repeat offenders would face escalating consequences that could climb as high as $10,000 for continued dangerous play. The league announced it quietly. No press conference. No commissioner statement delivered with dramatic weight. Just a policy update, filed and published like a routine memo. But nothing about the reaction was routine. Within hours, sports pages across every platform had picked up the story. And the response was immediate, emotional, and completely divided. On one side, Caitlin Clark supporters, and honestly a large portion of the general sports watching public, reacted with something between relief and skepticism. Relief that the league had finally acknowledged the problem existed. Skepticism because the math still didn't add up. Think about it this way. Under the new CBA, WNBA players are earning more money than at any point in the league's history. Veteran stars, role players, even second-round rookies are seeing salary increases that represent real, meaningful financial progress for the sport. That's genuinely good. That matters. But when fans pulled out calculators and started comparing the new fine amounts to the new salary figures, the conversation got uncomfortable fast. A $500 fine for a technical foul. A few $1,000s for a flagrant that could end someone's season. For players now earning 6 figures. Sometimes significantly more, these numbers felt less like deterrence and more like a suggested donation. Former players noticed it too. Analysts on ESPN and The Athletic started running the comparisons publicly. The debate wasn't just happening in comment sections anymore. It was on sports radio, on podcasts, in pre-game television coverage. And
out
right
running,
in the middle
here's
of all
Diamond
of
to
it,
Shields
was a
for the
player whose
easy
name had been
two.
attached to this entire conversation from the very beginning. Caitlin Clark. Here's something important that often gets lost in the noise. Caitlin Clark has never asked for special treatment. She has never stood at a podium and demanded the league protect her differently than any other player. She plays physical defense herself. She competes. She battles. What her fans have been asking for, loudly, repeatedly, and with genuine passion, isn't favoritism, it's consistency. The argument was never protect Caitlin Clark more than everyone else. The argument was apply the rules the same way for every player, in every game, regardless of who's involved. And that distinction matters, because it reframes the entire conversation. This wasn't just a Caitlin Clark story anymore. It was a story about whether the WNBA's officiating and punishment systems were being applied uniformly. It was a story about whether the league's biggest stars, Aya Wilson absorbing contact in Las Vegas, Breanna Stewart battling through defenders in New York, Sabrina Ionescu drawing fouls that sometimes went uncalled, were all receiving the same standard protection the rules promised them. The Clark controversy had become a lens, and through that lens, a lot of people were seeing things they hadn't noticed before. But then, just when the debate was starting to feel like it might settle into something rational, the named players responded, not all of them officially, not all of them directly, but the reaction started surfacing in interviews, on social media, through people close to the situations. And what some of them said or pointedly refused to say made the entire story spin in a direction nobody predicted, because it turned out the fine structure wasn't even the most explosive part of what was coming. The real story was about what was happening inside the locker rooms. Every locker room has a code. What gets said inside those walls stays inside those walls, until it doesn't. The fine structure announcement had barely settled when the real conversations started leaking out, not through official press releases, not through commissioner statements, through the places where WNBA truth has always traveled fastest. Post-game interviews where a player pauses just a half second too long before answering. Social media posts that go up and come down within hours, and the kind of quiet background sourcing that reporters build entire careers around. And what was surfacing painted a picture far more complicated than a simple villain versus hero narrative. Because here's what the loudest voices online kept getting wrong. This was never just about dirty players targeting one rookie out of jealousy or spite. The reality inside the league was messier, more human, and honestly more interesting than that. Veteran WNBA players had spent years, in some cases, entire careers, fighting for visibility that the league struggled to deliver. Diana Taurasi built a legendary resume across 2 decades and still had to explain to casual sports fans who she was. Sue Bird won 4 championships, 5 Olympic gold medals, and transformed the Seattle Storm into a dynasty, and still watch her games air on channels most people had to search to find. Aya Wilson became the most dominant player in the league, back-to-back MVP, finals champion in the face of the Las Vegas Aces, and her signature shoe deal made headlines specifically because it took that long for a player of her caliber to get one. These weren't bitter footnotes. They were real, documented frustrations that an entire generation of WNBA players had carried publicly and privately. And then Caitlin Clark arrived, and the cameras followed immediately, not gradually, not after she'd earned it on the pro level. Immediately, before she played a single WNBA minute. Now, to be completely clear, that visibility wasn't Clark's fault. She didn't manufacture her own popularity. She earned it through years of extraordinary play at Iowa. The fans who followed her were real. The ratings she drove were real. The cultural moment was real. But the emotional complexity inside locker rooms across the league, also real. Chundy Carter spoke first, indirectly, carefully, but undeniably. In the weeks following the wave of controversy, she addressed the physicality narrative not with an apology, but with context. Basketball is physical. It has always been physical. The WNBA is a professional league of elite athletes, not a controlled environment. Contact happens. Dejonai Carrington's camp maintained that the eye incident was accidental, a position supported by the fact that the league's own review resulted in a relatively modest consequence rather than a suspension. Angel Reese, whose rivalry with Clark dated back to their NCAA collision in the 2023 National Championship game, had been pulled into the controversy repeatedly despite many of the incidents involving entirely different players. Her response, characteristically, came through performance. She kept playing. She kept rebounding. She kept being exactly who she was. And the fans who had spent months demanding blood, many of them quietly started doing something they hadn't expected. They started listening. Because here's what actually changed in 2026. It wasn't just the fines. The WNBA, whether driven by genuine reflection or cold financial logic, probably both, began making structural adjustments that went deeper than a revised penalty schedule, enhanced officiating training, expanded replay review windows, public communication from the league office on flagrant foul decisions that had previously been handled in near total silence. Was it enough? Fans were divided. Analysts were divided. The players themselves were divided. But something undeniable had happened. Caitlin Clark's presence had forced a reckoning the league had quietly needed for years. Not just about physical play, about visibility, about equity, about what it actually looks like when a sport finally gets the mainstream attention it always deserved, and discovers that attention comes with impossible pressure attached to every single moment. The WNBA was panicking, yes, but underneath the panic was something that looked, for the first time in a long time, like urgency. And urgency in sports, in business, in life, is where real change actually begins. So here's the question nobody is asking loudly enough. What happens next season? When the arenas are even bigger, the contracts are even larger, the cameras are everywhere, and the entire country is watching every play in real time. The league changed the fines. But the real test hasn't even started yet. If you made it this far, you already know the story isn't over. Drop a comment below. Do you think the WNBA's new rules are enough? Or is this just the beginning of something much bigger? Subscribe, because when the next chapter hits, and it will, you'll want to be here for it.